types of pollination in the previous videos. If you remember, we did autogamy, we also did about heterogamy, and we did about xenogamy. Now we are going to do agents of pollination. Before we go ahead, we should know that we can broadly classify the agents of pollination into two categories, that is abiotic and biotic. In this video, I will be dealing with the abiotic agents of pollination. Is it okay? Not with the biotic. Biotic one will take it up in the next video. Agents of pollination can be broadly classified into two categories, abiotic and biotic. When we say abiotic agents of pollination, we are mainly talking about wind and water. We are talking about pollination caused by wind and pollination caused by water. We have specific terms which are used for this. We are going to go ahead and learn this. See, pollination by wind or wind pollination, the term is anemophily. A-N-E-M-O, anemophily. So what is anemophily? It is pollination by wind, or you could simply say wind pollination. Similarly, the pollination which is caused by water, that is water pollination, is called hydrophily. So we are going to study about which two pollinations in this video? Anemophily and hydrophily. Anemophily is pollination caused by wind, that is wind pollination, and hydrophily is pollination which is caused by water, that is water pollination. Now, adaptations of wind pollinated flowers. Obviously, flowers have to undergo certain modifications or certain adaptations so that they can be pollinated by wind. So we are going to study that adaptations of wind pollinated flowers. That means we are going to study about the adaptations which those flowers undergo or adapt so that they can be pollinated by wind. The first is they are small, colorless, and they are nectarless. As there is no need to attract insects, so obviously color and nectar is not needed. So they are colorless, nectarless, and very important thing, they are small in size so that they can be easily carried by the wind. So the first point is they are small, colorless, and nectarless. Second data, they often have a single ovule in each ovary. Normally we said ovary may have one ovule or it may have more than one. But when we talk about flowers which are pollinated by wind, normally in most of the cases there is a single ovule present in each ovary and many flowers packed into an inflorescence. So how is the structure like? Single ovule in each ovary and lot of flowers which are packed into an inflorescence, like the tassels of a corn cob. Is it okay? Like tassels of corn cob. Listen again, what is the structural arrangement we have? We have a single ovule in each ovary and many flowers packed into an inflorescence. For example, the tassels of the corn cob. Third adaptation for wind pollination is that the anthers are well exposed, okay, so that the pollen grain can be easily dispersed. The anthers are well exposed so that pollen grain can be easily dispersed. Fourth, the pollen grains are small, the pollen are light, the pollen grains are dry, dusty, and they are non-sticky, or even sometimes the pollen grains have wings. We call them as winged pollen grains. So, pollen grains are small, light, dry, dusty, non-sticky, or sometimes they will be even winged. The next point, the stigmas are large, hairy, feathery, and branched. Like we said, pollen grains are small, but on the contrary, if you see, stigmas are large, hairy, feathery, and branched. Why are they so? This is a structural modification to catch the pollen grain easily. Now, for example, sugarcane and coconut. What is the example for anemophily? Remember, sugarcane and coconut. These are the adaptations for anemophily, that is wind pollination. Now we move on to the second abiotic pollination, that is hydrophily, that is water pollination. See, this hydrophily is very rare in flowering plants. Only about 30 genera they opt for hydrophily. Otherwise, most of the flowering plants they do not opt for hydrophily. And that too, out of these 30 genera which opt for hydrophily, mostly we have monocotyledons. So, very few plants, that is only around 30 genera of flowering plants opt for hydrophily, and out of those 30 also mostly they are monocotyledons. Now we are going to study about adaptations for hydrophily. See, always remember that hydrophily is common in lower plants, not in flowering plants. Hydrophily is common in lower plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. It is not found in flowering plants, mainly it is common in lower plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. Flowers are again small, colorless, odorless, and nectarless. As we have already discussed that attraction to insects is not needed. So flowers are small, colorless, odorless, and nectarless. Moving on to stigma. Stigma are long, sticky. For example, Vallisneria, Hydrilla, you know these examples. Here you will see stigmas are long and sticky so that they can facilitate the hydrophily. Next beta, mostly what happens is that the pollen grain are protected by a coating, a waxy coating, that is a mucilaginous covering. And why does this happen? So that they can get protected by water. They will be exposed to water, they will be in water for a lot of time so that they don't desiccate, they don't rot out, but they are protected from getting wet with the help of what? With the help of a mucilaginous covering. Next beta, also remember that hydrophily does not mean that all aquatic plants use water for pollination. This does not happen. It does not happen that all aquatic plants will use water for pollination. In some flowers we have a different mechanism. In aquatic plants only. What do they do? In many flowers what happens is, if you see, the flowers they emerge above the level of water. The flower, it rises up above the level of water and then they are pollinated by insects or wind, like normally we have it in land plants. What happens in these aquatic plants? See, like best example to remember is water lily or water hyacinth. What happens in water lily and water hyacinth? The flowers they emerge above, they come above the level of the water and then they get normally pollinated by insects or wind as normally it happens in land plants. Now another adaptation we will see that in some aquatic plants the female flower reaches the surface of the water. How does it reach the surface of the water? By a long stalk. So only the female flower, it reaches the surface of the water by a long stalk and the pollen grain, okay, they are released on the surface of water. The pollen grain will be released in the surface of water and then they are carried by water. For example, Vallisneria is the best example. The last one beta, in some plants what happens is the female flowers remain submerged in water. Like in Vallisneria I told you the female flower reaches above the surface of water. But in some other cases what happens is, it is the female flower, it remains submerged in water and the pollen grain, they are released inside the water only. The female flower is submerged in water, so the pollen grain are also released inside the water. In such species what happens is, the pollen grain are a little specialized. How are they specialized? The pollen grain are long, ribbon-like and are carried inside the water to reach the stigma. Here there is a little structural modification in the pollen grains. If the female flower is submerged in water, then there is a structural modification in pollen grains. The pollen grains become long, ribbon-like and then they are carried inside the water easily to reach the stigma and pollination can be achieved. So we have done two kinds of abiotic pollination. Pollination by wind, which is known as anemophily, and pollination by water, which is known as hydrophily. So this is all about abiotic agents of pollination. In the next video we will take up the biotic agents of pollination.